He broke his vows. And my name. The words echoed through the empty cabin as Emily Ross stared at the cold fireplace. Outside, November wind rattled the windows like accusation itself. Her wedding ring lay on the wooden table, a circle of gold that had meant everything yesterday and nothing tonight. The whole town knew by now how Marcus had taken that saloon girl to Kansas City, how he'd emptied their bank account, how he'd left Emily with nothing but shame and whispered conversations that stopped when she walked into Miller's General Store. She could still hear Mrs. Peterson's voice from this morning. Poor dear Emily, such a good wife too. Makes you wonder what she did wrong. The words had cut deeper than any blade. What had she done wrong? Loved too much? Trusted too completely? Emily touched her cheek where the bruise was finally fading. Marcus had given her that parting gift 3 nights ago when she'd confronted him about the missing money. You're nothing but a burden, he'd snarled before walking out forever. The fire had died hours ago. Emily hadn't bothered to rebuild it. What was the point? The cold outside felt warmer than the emptiness inside her chest. Mrs. Ross. The voice came from outside, gentle but unfamiliar. Ma'am, I saw your lamp burning. Everything all right? Emily wiped her eyes quickly. She didn't recognize the voice, probably another neighbor coming to offer hollow sympathy, or worse, pity wrapped in kind words. I'm fine, she called back, though her voice cracked on the words. No offense, ma'am, but nobody sits alone in the dark when they're fine. Despite everything, Emily almost smiled. The stranger had a point. She moved to the door but didn't open it. Trust had become a luxury she couldn't afford. Who are you? She asked. Name's Andrew Collins. Drew, if you prefer. I just bought the old Henderson place down the valley. Saw your light and thought you might need help. Emily pressed her forehead against the rough wood door. A stranger. Someone who didn't know her story yet. Someone who hadn't heard the whispers about the woman whose husband ran off with a painted lady. What kind of help? She asked. Whatever kind you need. There was something in his voice. Not pity, not curiosity, just honest concern from one human being to another. Emily's hand moved to the door latch before she caught herself. How many times had Marcus used that same gentle tone? You don't know me, she said. No, ma'am, but I know what despair sounds like, and I know nobody should face it alone. Thunder rumbled overhead. Closer now, the storm that had been threatening all day was finally ready to break. Emily looked around her empty cabin, at the cold stove, at the wedding ring that belonged to a life that no longer existed, at the empty cupboards that reminded her she had barely enough flour for tomorrow's bread. The storm's coming, she said. Yes, ma'am, that's why I stopped. Nobody should weather a storm alone. Emily closed her eyes. When had someone last offered her kindness without wanting something in return? Marcus had trained her to be suspicious of every gesture, every word. But this stranger's voice held something she'd almost forgotten existed. Genuine concern. But what she didn't know was that this stranger would change everything she thought she knew about trust. The first drops of rain began hitting the roof like tiny fists demanding entry. Emily's hand trembled on the door latch. She'd been betrayed by the man who'd promised to love her forever. Could she really trust a complete stranger? Yet what choice did she have? Sit here alone listening to the storm and her own broken thoughts? Mrs. Ross? The storm's getting worse. I don't want to leave you alone if you need anything. His voice carried genuine worry. Not the fake concern she'd endured from townspeople who wanted gossip more than they wanted to help. This was different. This was real. Emily took a deep breath and opened the door. The man standing on her porch was tall and lean, with kind brown eyes and rain-dampened dark hair. He held his hat in his hands respectfully, water dripping from the brim. His clothes were simple but clean. Work clothes that had seen honest labor. Everything about him seemed solid, dependable. Thank you for stopping, Emily said quietly. Would you like some coffee? Drew Collins smiled, and for the first time in weeks, Emily felt something other than despair stirring in her chest. Not hope exactly, not yet, but something warmer than the cold that had settled in her bones. I'd be grateful for coffee, ma'am. It's been a long day. Emily stepped back to let him enter. As he crossed the threshold, she noticed he was careful to keep his distance. Respectful, not presuming anything just because she'd invited him in. The last man who'd stood in her kitchen had called her worthless before walking out forever. This one simply said, "Thank you for the kindness, Mrs. Ross." Emily moved to the stove, grateful for something to do with her shaking hands. The coffee tin was nearly empty. Another reminder of how little she had left, but she measured out what remained, determined to show this stranger the same courtesy he'd shown her. "I should warn you," she said, her back to him as she worked. "The whole town talks about me. My husband left 3 days ago with another woman, took everything we had." Drew was quiet for a long moment. Emily braced herself for the awkward silence, the quick excuse to leave. That's what decent people did when faced with scandal. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "That must hurt something fierce." Emily turned, surprised by the genuine sympathy in his voice. "You're not going to ask what I did wrong, or tell me I'm better off without him?" "No, ma'am. Seems to me a man who'd abandon his wife is the one with the problem." Something tight in Emily's chest loosened slightly. When was the last time someone had defended her instead of judging her? The coffee began to bubble. Emily poured it into 2 chipped cups, her hands steadier now. "Sugar's gone," she admitted. "But it's hot and strong. That's all a man needs on a night like this." As Emily handed him the cup, their fingers brushed. She expected to pull away immediately. Touch had become dangerous with Marcus, but Drew's hands were gentle, calloused from honest work, safe. "Mrs. Ross," he said carefully. "I don't mean to pry, but are you managing all right? With food and such?" Emily's cheeks burned with shame. "I'm fine." "I see." Drew sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Well, I've got more supplies than one man needs at my place. Garden's producing more vegetables than I can eat. Seems a shame to let them go to waste." It was charity, but offered so gently that it didn't feel like pity. "I couldn't," Emily whispered. "Not even if I said I could use help with canning them for winter? I'm hopeless at such things. My late wife, she had the touch for preserving. I never learned proper." Emily looked up sharply. "Your wife?" "Died of fever 2 winters back. That's why I moved here. Too many memories in Colorado." So he understood loss. Real loss. Not just abandonment, but death. Emily felt something shift inside her chest. This man knew grief. Outside, lightning split the sky, followed by thunder that shook the cabin walls. Drew glanced toward the windows as rain began hammering the roof harder. "This storm's getting dangerous," he said. "I should head back before it gets worse." "You can't ride in this," Emily said quickly. "The creek floods fast in storms like this." But as if the storm itself disagreed, another massive crack of thunder shook the cabin, and the rain turned to a roar against the windows. Emily looked at this kind stranger who'd given her the first moment of peace she'd felt in days. "There's a spare room," she heard herself say. "If you don't mind staying until the storm passes." Drew met her eyes. "Are you sure? I don't want to compromise your reputation any more than it already is." The fact that he even thought about her reputation made Emily's throat tight. Marcus had never cared about such things. "My reputation is already ruined," she said quietly. "But yours doesn't have to be." "Mrs. Ross," Drew said gently, "I've learned that a person's worth isn't determined by gossip, and anyone who'd judge you for showing kindness to a stranger in a storm isn't worth worrying about." And that was when Emily realized that this storm might be washing away more than just the dust from her doorstep. It might be washing away the woman Marcus had tried to make her believe she was. Emily woke to the sound of chopping wood. For a moment she lay still in her bed, confused. Marcus had never chopped wood in his life. Then memory flooded back. The storm, the stranger, Drew Collins. She dressed quickly and stepped outside to find Drew splitting logs behind her cabin. His shirt was already damp with sweat despite the cool morning air. He'd stacked enough firewood to last her through the next 2 weeks. "You didn't have to do that," Emily called out. Drew straightened, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "Figured you could use it. Storm brought down some good timber." Emily's throat tightened. When was the last time someone had thought about her needs without being asked? "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing. Neighbors help neighbors." But the way he said it wasn't casual charity. It was matter-of-fact kindness, as if helping her was the most natural thing in the world. "Coffee's ready," Emily said. "If you have time." Drew smiled. "I always have time for good coffee." As they sat at her small kitchen table, Emily found herself studying this man who'd appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she'd been too proud to speak. His hands wrapped around the coffee cup were strong but gentle. Working hands. Honest hands. "Tell me about your wife," Emily said suddenly, then immediately regretted the boldness. "I'm sorry, that was too personal." "No, it's all right." Drew's eyes grew distant. "Her name was Sarah. She had a laugh that could fill a whole room, loved to garden, made the best apple pie in 3 counties. Emily heard the love in his voice, but also something else. Peace. This was a man who'd grieved fully and come through the other side. How long were you married? 12 years. We tried for children, but… Drew shrugged. Sometimes things just aren't meant to be. Emily felt a stab of sympathy. She and Marcus had never even discussed children. He'd been too busy chasing every scheme that promised quick money. Do you miss her terribly? Emily asked. Every day. But missing someone and being consumed by loss are different things. Sarah wouldn't have wanted me to stop living. Emily stared into her coffee. I don't think I know how to do that. Stop being consumed by what happened. Give it time, and give yourself permission to feel angry. You've got every right to be furious. Emily's head snapped up. Everyone keeps telling me I should be grateful, that I'm better off without him. Are you grateful? The question caught Emily off guard. She'd been expecting platitudes, not honest inquiry. No, she whispered. I'm angry. I'm humiliated. I'm terrified of what comes next. Good, Drew said firmly. That's honest. Anger means you know you deserved better. Something in Emily's chest unclenched. When had someone last told her that her feelings were valid? But what she didn't realize was that across town Marcus was already stirring up trouble. Drew finished his coffee and stood. I should let you get on with your day. But Emily, he paused, using her first name for the first time. If you need anything at all, you know where to find me. Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. After he left, she sat in her kitchen feeling something she hadn't experienced in months. Not quite hope, but a sense that perhaps tomorrow wouldn't be exactly like yesterday. That feeling lasted until Mrs. Peterson appeared at her door an hour later, eyes bright with malicious excitement. Emily, dear, the older woman began, not waiting to be invited in. I felt I should warn you. People are talking. Emily's stomach dropped. About what? About that man spending the night here. Really, Emily, I know you're upset about Marcus, but this isn't the way to handle things. The unfairness of it hit Emily like a physical blow. He stayed because of the storm. Nothing happened. I'm sure that's true, dear. But you know how people talk. And with your reputation already, Mrs. Peterson trailed off with false sympathy. My reputation, Emily repeated slowly. What exactly are people saying about my reputation? Mrs. Peterson leaned forward, relishing her role as bearer of gossip. Well, they're wondering if perhaps you drove Marcus away, if you weren't fulfilling your wifely duties properly. Emily felt her face burn. Marcus left because he found someone younger and took our money. That's not my fault. Of course not, dear. But you must understand how it looks. A failed wife taking up with the first man who shows her kindness. It's almost desperate. The word hung in the air like poison. Emily stood slowly, her hands shaking with rage. Get out, she said quietly. Emily, I'm only trying to help. Get out of my house. Mrs. Peterson's eyes widened at Emily's tone. Well, I was trying to be a friend. Friends don't come into your home to tear you down when you're already broken. Get out. After Mrs. Peterson left in a huff, Emily sank into her chair and buried her face in her hands. The brief warmth she'd felt from Drew's kindness was already being poisoned by the town's judgment. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was desperate. Maybe she was reading too much into simple neighborly kindness. But then she remembered Drew's words, give yourself permission to feel angry. You've got every right to be furious. And suddenly, Emily was furious. Not at Drew, not at herself, but at a world that blamed her for her husband's betrayal and then judged her for accepting help from a decent man. She was tired of being ashamed. Tired of apologizing for existing. Tired of letting other people's small minds make her feel small. Emily stood and walked to her mirror. The woman looking back at her had changed in just one day. There was steel in her eyes now. A strength she'd forgotten she possessed. If the town wanted to talk, let them talk. She knew the truth. Drew Collins was a good man who'd shown her kindness when she needed it most. And she wasn't going to let anyone make her ashamed of that. Yet what Emily didn't know was that Marcus had returned to town that very morning, and he was about to make everything much more complicated. Emily was hanging laundry when she heard the horse approaching. She looked up to see Marcus riding toward her cabin, dressed in a new suit and wearing that familiar smug smile that had once charmed her and now made her stomach turn. "Hello, Emily," he said, dismounting with theatrical flair. "You're looking well." Emily's hand stilled on the clothesline. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Can't a man visit his wife?" "Ex-wife," Emily corrected coldly. "You made that clear when you emptied our account and left with that saloon girl." Marcus laughed, a sound that grated against Emily's nerves. "Clarissa, that was just a bit of fun. I'm back now." "Back for what?" "For you, of course. I've realized my mistake." He stepped closer, his voice taking on that persuasive tone she remembered too well. "We can work this out, Emily. I know I hurt you, but—" "Stop." Emily held up her hand. "Just stop talking." But Marcus pressed on, circling her like a predator. "I heard you've been entertaining visitors. That's not like you, Emily. Getting desperate already?" Emily's jaw tightened. "Drew Collins is a neighbor who helped me during the storm. Nothing more." "Drew Collins?" Marcus's eyes sharpened. "The widower who bought the Henderson place? Rich man, from what I hear. Smart of you to set your sights so quickly." The accusation hit Emily like a slap. "How dare you? Come now, we both know you can't manage on your own. You need a man to take care of you. Always have." Emily felt that familiar sensation of being diminished, made small by Marcus's words. For a moment she was the uncertain woman who'd believed his lies about her inadequacy. Then she remembered Drew's voice. "Give yourself permission to feel angry." "You're right about one thing," Emily said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I can't manage the way things were because the way things were was me working myself to death while you gambled away everything we had." Marcus's face darkened. "Watch your tongue, Emily." "Or what? You'll leave again? Promise?" Something dangerous flickered in Marcus's eyes. "I'm trying to be reasonable here, but if you think you can embarrass me in this town, you're mistaken." "Embarrass you?" Emily's voice rose. "You embarrassed yourself when you ran off with a girl half your age." Marcus grabbed her wrist, his grip tight enough to bruise. "You forget yourself, wife? Let go of me." "Not until you remember your place." Emily tried to pull away, but Marcus's grip tightened. Panic flared in her chest. She'd forgotten how quickly his charm could turn to violence. "Let her go." Both Emily and Marcus turned to see Drew Collins approaching on horseback, his face like thunder. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. "This is a private conversation," Marcus snarled, but he released Emily's wrist. "Didn't look private from where I was standing." Drew's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Looked like a man putting his hands on a woman who didn't want them there. Marcus puffed up his chest. "This is my wife you're talking about." "No," Emily said, finding her voice. "I'm not your wife anymore, you made sure of that." Drew positioned himself between Emily and Marcus, and Emily felt a wave of relief at his solid presence. "You need to leave," Drew said quietly. "Now." Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. "And what if I don't?" Drew didn't answer with words. He simply stood there, calm and unmovable, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face. The silence stretched until Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "This isn't over, Emily," Marcus said finally. "We have unfinished business." "No, we don't," Emily replied. "We're finished, completely." After Marcus rode away, Emily sank onto her porch steps, her legs suddenly weak. Drew sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "You all right?" he asked. Emily nodded, then shook her head. "I don't know. For a moment there I felt like I was disappearing again. Like I was becoming that small, scared woman he always said I was. But you didn't disappear. You stood up to him. Only because you showed up." "No," Drew said firmly. "I heard the whole thing, Emily. You were standing your ground before I ever got here. You told him exactly what you thought of him." Emily looked at Drew in surprise. Had she really done that? She'd been so focused on her fear that she'd missed her own courage. "He'll be back," she said quietly. "Probably, but you don't have to face him alone." Emily felt something warm bloom in her chest at his words, but doubt crept in. "People are already talking about us. If they see you here again, let them talk. Their opinions don't change who you are." But what she didn't know was that Marcus was already spreading poison throughout the town. Drew stood and offered Emily his hand. "Come on, I was heading into town for supplies. You should come with me." Emily hesitated. Showing up in town with Drew would only fuel more gossip, but hiding in her cabin wouldn't make the talk stop either. "All right," she said, taking his hand, But I need to stop at the bank first. As they rode into town together, Emily noticed the stares and whispered conversations that followed them. But instead of shrinking under the attention, she held her head high. Drew's steady presence beside her made her feel stronger somehow. At the bank, Emily's worst fears were confirmed. Marcus had been there that morning, claiming rights to their joint account as her husband. The bank president, Mr. Hawthorne, looked uncomfortable as he explained. Legally, Mrs. Ross, until there's a formal divorce decree, he has access to any joint accounts. But he already took everything, Emily protested. There's nothing left. I know, and I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. Emily felt the familiar surge of helplessness, but this time anger came with it. So he can steal our money, abandon me, come back when it suits him, and still have legal claim to anything I might earn. Mr. Hawthorne winced. I'm afraid so. Unless what? Unless you have protection. A male relative or a new husband who could challenge his claims. Emily's face burned. So even the bank saw her as property to be passed between men. Outside the bank, Drew was waiting with supplies loaded in his wagon. One look at Emily's face told him everything. Bad news? He can take anything I earn. The law sees me as his property until there's a formal divorce. Emily's voice shook with frustrated rage. And divorce costs money I don't have. Drew was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, there might be another way. Emily looked at him questioningly. But it would mean more talk. More people assuming things about us. What kind of way? Drew met her eyes. If you were under my protection, officially, it would make Marcus think twice about pressing his claims. Emily stared at him. You mean marriage? I mean a business arrangement that protects you from Marcus and gives you legal standing. Nothing more than that unless, Drew paused, unless someday you wanted it to be more. Emily's heart raced. Was this kind man really offering to tie himself to her troubles, to stand between her and Marcus's legal claims? Why would you do that? She whispered. Because everyone deserves a chance to start over. And because, Drew smiled softly. Because I think you're worth protecting. And that was when Emily realized that perhaps destiny had brought more than just shelter from the storm. It had brought her a chance at a completely different life. Emily stared at Drew's proposal, her heart hammering against her ribs. Marriage, a business arrangement, protection from Marcus. It was practical. It was logical. It was also terrifying. I need time to think, she whispered. Drew nodded. Of course. It's a big decision. But as they drove back toward Emily's cabin, they found they weren't alone. Marcus was waiting on her porch, and he wasn't alone either. Sheriff Dalton stood beside him, looking uncomfortable but official. Mrs. Ross, the sheriff called out as they approached. I need to speak with you. Emily's stomach dropped. What about? Your husband has made some serious allegations. Drew helped Emily down from the wagon, his jaw tight. What kind of allegations? Marcus stepped forward, his face a mask of false concern. I'm worried about my wife's mental state, Sheriff. She's been acting erratically since I left on business, consorting with strange men, making wild accusations about our finances. That's a lie, Emily said, but her voice came out smaller than she intended. Is it? Marcus pulled out a folded paper. I have documentation here showing that Emily has been making unauthorized withdrawals from our account. Small amounts but consistent, almost like she was planning something. Emily felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Those had been withdrawals for food for basic survival after he'd abandoned her, but presented this way, they sounded suspicious. Mrs. Ross, Sheriff Dalton said gently. Your husband is concerned you might be suffering from female hysteria. He's requesting a competency hearing. The words hit Emily like a physical blow. Female hysteria. The catch-all diagnosis used to strip women of their rights, their property, their freedom. If Marcus succeeded, she could be declared mentally unfit, institutionalized. Everything she owned would revert to him as her legal guardian. She's not hysterical, Drew said sharply. She's responding rationally to being abandoned and robbed. Marcus's eyes glittered. And you are? Drew Collins, Mrs. Ross's neighbor. Ah yes, the neighbor. Marcus's voice dripped with insinuation. Tell me, Mr. Collins, how well do you know my wife? Well enough to spend the night in her home? Emily saw the trap closing around them. Marcus had been busy since his return, gathering ammunition. Mr. Collins provided shelter during the storm, Emily said quickly. Nothing inappropriate occurred. Of course not, Marcus said smoothly. But you can understand how it looks. A married woman alone with a man who isn't her husband, making wild claims about finances, acting against her natural feminine disposition. Sheriff Dalton shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Ross, perhaps you should consider returning home with your husband while this gets sorted out. No. The word tore from Emily's throat with unexpected force. I won't go anywhere with him. You see, Marcus said sadly. This defiance, this unwomanly behavior. It's not like her. I fear she may be having some kind of nervous breakdown. Emily felt the familiar sensation of the world closing in around her. This was how Marcus worked. He twisted truth into lies, made victims look like villains. He'd done it their entire marriage, making her doubt her own perceptions, her own sanity. But this time she wasn't alone. Sheriff, Drew said calmly, before you make any decisions, you might want to know that Mrs. Ross has accepted my proposal of marriage. The words landed like a thunderbolt. Emily's head snapped toward Drew, her eyes wide. What? Marcus sputtered. Emily and I are engaged, Drew continued, his voice steady. The banns will be posted tomorrow. As her intended husband, I believe I have the right to speak for her welfare. Emily's mind raced. Drew was lying to protect her, giving her a way out of Marcus's trap. But marriage to Drew, even a fake engagement, would become real gossip, real expectation. That's impossible, Marcus said. She's still married to me. Actually, Sheriff Dalton said slowly, if Mrs. Ross was abandoned by her husband and left destitute, she has grounds for annulment, especially if she can prove desertion and theft. Emily saw the calculation in Marcus's eyes. He'd expected this to be simple. Swoop in, declare her incompetent, take control of any assets she might acquire. He hadn't counted on Drew. This is ridiculous, Marcus snapped. She can't just decide she's unmarried. No, Drew said quietly, but she can decide who she trusts to protect her interests. And it seems she's decided that's not you. The moment stretched taut. Emily could feel the sheriff studying all of them, trying to decide where the truth lay. Mrs. Ross, Sheriff Dalton said finally, do you feel you're in any danger from your husband? Emily met Marcus's eyes and saw the threat there, the promise of consequences if she spoke against him. For years that look had been enough to silence her. Not anymore. Yes, she said clearly. He's threatened me. He's put his hands on me violently, and he's trying to steal what little I have left. Marcus's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the angry man beneath. You lying. Mr. Ross, Sheriff Dalton warned. I think you should leave now. This isn't over, Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. I know what she is, what she's become, and soon everyone else will too. After Marcus stormed off, Sheriff Dalton tipped his hat to Emily. Ma'am, if you need anything, you let me know. And congratulations on your engagement. When they were alone, Emily turned to Drew, her emotions a whirlwind of gratitude and terror. Why did you do that? She asked. Because you needed protection, and it was the only thing I could think of that would give Marcus pause. But now the whole town will expect us to actually marry. Drew was quiet for a long moment. Would that be so terrible? Emily stared at him. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brave enough to stand up to a man who terrifies you. I know you're kind enough to offer coffee to a stranger in a storm. I know you deserve better than what you've had. Emily felt tears burning her eyes. This isn't how normal people get engaged. Maybe not, but nothing about our situation is normal. Drew stepped closer, his voice gentle. Emily, I meant what I said earlier. This can be just a business arrangement if that's what you want, but I'd be honored if someday it became something more. And that was when Emily realized that sometimes the most important decisions in life come disguised as desperate measures. But what she didn't know was that Marcus's threats weren't empty, and he was already planning his next move. 3 days later, Emily stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the simple blue dress that had been her mother's. Today she would marry Drew Collins. Not for love, she told herself, for protection, for survival, for a chance at a different life. But her reflection told a different story. There was color in her cheeks again, hope in her eyes. When had that happened? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Drew handsome in his Sunday best, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. For you, he said softly. I know this isn't the wedding you probably dreamed of as a girl. Emily took the flowers, breathing in their sweet scent. I stopped dreaming of weddings a long time ago. They rode to the church together in comfortable silence. Emily noticed how Drew's presence made her feel settled, safe. When had that become so natural? At the church, a small crowd had gathered. Not the whole town, but enough people to make it official, to make it real. But Marcus was there too, lurking at the back of the church like a dark cloud. Emily's step faltered when she saw him. "He can't stop this," Drew murmured. "The law is on our side now." Pastor Williams performed the ceremony with dignity and warmth. When he asked if anyone objected to the union, Emily held her breath. Marcus remained silent, but his eyes promised this wasn't over. "Do you, Andrew Collins, take Emily to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Drew's voice was steady, certain. "Do you, Emily Ross, take Andrew to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Emily looked into Drew's kind brown eyes. This man who'd chopped her wood without being asked, who'd defended her reputation without knowing her, who'd stood between her and Marcus's violence, who'd offered her protection without asking for anything in return. "I do," she whispered. "You may kiss your bride." Drew leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers. It was gentle, respectful, but Emily felt something spark between them, a promise of what might grow between them in time. As they walked down the aisle as husband and wife, Emily caught Marcus's expression. Rage and calculation warred in his eyes. This wasn't over for him, but somehow that didn't terrify her anymore. "You look happy," Mrs. Henderson observed. "Happier than I've seen you in years." Emily realized it was true. When had she stopped feeling like she was drowning? But what she didn't expect was Marcus making one final play. As the evening wound down, Marcus approached them near the church steps. "Congratulations," he said, his voice dripping false sincerity. "Though I wonder how long this little arrangement will last when Collins discovers what kind of woman he's really married." "That's enough," Drew said firmly. "Is it, as she told you about the debts, Collins? The money she owes around town, the promises she made to certain men when she was desperate?" Emily felt her blood turn to ice. Marcus was lying, creating scandals that didn't exist. But would Drew believe her? "She hasn't told you, has she?" Marcus continued with a cruel smile. "About the compromising letters? The reasons I really left?" "Marcus, stop," Emily breathed. "The truth, Emily? Or should your new husband hear it from someone else?" Drew stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. "Let me tell you what I know, Ross. I know Emily makes the best coffee in 3 counties. I know she's brave enough to face down gossips and strong enough to survive abandonment. I know she's kind to strangers and honest about her fears." Marcus's smile faltered. "And I know," Drew continued, "that whatever lies you're about to tell say more about you than they do about her. So why don't you move along before I decide the sheriff needs to hear about those compromising letters you supposedly have?" Marcus's face twisted with rage, but he had no ammunition left. His bluff had been called. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Yes, it is," Emily said, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. "It's been over since the night you walked out. I just didn't know it yet." Marcus stalked away into the darkness, and Emily realized she wasn't watching him go with fear anymore. She was watching him go with relief. "Are you all right?" Drew asked gently. Emily nodded. He was lying. About the debts, the letters, all of it. "I know." "How?" Drew smiled. "Because I've seen who you really are, Emily, and she's nothing like the woman he was describing." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know how to be married again. I don't know how to trust. We'll figure it out together, one day at a time." As they drove home to the cabin that was now theirs, Emily marveled at how different everything looked. The same trees, the same road, but somehow brighter, more possible. "Drew," she said as they pulled up to the house. "Thank you for everything, for protecting me, for believing in me, for what? For seeing something in me worth saving." Drew turned to face her, his expression serious. "Emily, you saved yourself. You stood up to Marcus, you chose to trust me. You said yes to a different life. All I did was offer you a safe place to be brave." Emily looked at this man who'd become her husband, her protector, her partner. "Do you think," she began, then stopped. "What? Do you think we might actually be happy, someday?" Drew smiled, the same smile that had warmed her on that first stormy night. "Mrs. Collins, I think we might be happy starting right now." As they walked into their home together, Emily realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin not with passion but with kindness, not with perfect timing but with perfect trust. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the earth with fresh possibility, and inside the warm cabin, two wounded hearts began the quiet work of healing together. Marcus never bothered them again. Sheriff Dalton made sure of that. Emily didn't care what happened to Marcus. She was too busy learning that marriage could be partnership instead of prison, too busy falling in love with her own husband. And on spring mornings when she woke to the sound of Drew chopping wood, Emily would remember that stormy night when a stranger had knocked on her door. Sometimes the best things in life come disguised as storms.